welcome to Solar Alberta's 2023 Solar Series. Today's webinar is called Indigenous Leadership in the Solar Sector. My name is Heather McKenzie and I am the Executive Director of Solar Alberta. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm hosting you today from Amiskwaciwaskahagan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Metis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Papachaise, Nehewak, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux, nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We were delighted to have so many people register for this event. Please note that we will be recording this webinar for future distribution. Today, we will be hearing from two informative speakers. Dr. Deondre Smiles will begin by providing an overview of Indigenous leadership in renewable energy projects. Then Andres Filella will provide a tangible example and dive into programs and projects the Metis Nation of Alberta is using to accelerate solar adoption. Following the presentations, there will be a question and answer period in which you can all participate. The entire session will wrap up in an hour and a half. In an effort to increase accessibility to the content that we are offering, we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. During our Q&A period, we will be using Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat box, so please enter your questions in that Q&A section. Also, please click on the little thumbs up symbol to upvote questions that you like. Before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. So please take a minute to answer the question that's popping up on your screen now. Just getting to know the audience. And while some are still doing the poll, I encourage you to also take a minute to pop your name, land acknowledgement, and any contact info that you're comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event so that others can look you up on LinkedIn or email you. This is a great way to form some new relationships. All right, thank you very much for participating in the poll. Just gonna end that now. It's always helpful to know a little bit more about the audience. And there we go, 44% solar curious, 47 industry professionals, solar industry students 9. So a really interesting mix of folks here today. Welcome everyone. And now just a little about Solar Alberta for any of you who are new to us. We are actually in our 32nd year of operation. Solar Alberta is a nonprofit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do so by advocating, a lot these days, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 900 individuals and businesses. In response to the recent moratorium on large-scale renewable projects in Alberta, Solar Alberta has launched an advocacy campaign called Rise Up for Renewables, intended to end the pause on approvals. You can also follow the link in the chat now for a template letter that you can send to the Alberta Utilities Commission, asking them to end the moratorium. The deadline to submit comments through their consultation is tomorrow. We hope to begin distributing lawn signs like that pictured here soon. So stay up to date about all of that by signing up for our newsletter at solaralberta.ca. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory and request for quotes system through our website. In this way, we act as a bridge for installers, suppliers, and other solar-related businesses to connect with their customers and clients. You can see a screenshot of the directory here on this slide and a link to it in the chat. In addition to our website services, we run a number of educational programs, such as this solar seminar series, and some in-person and online networking events each year. Our next seminar will be held on September 28th, and it will be about the history and evolution of solar in Alberta. We're also planning an October networking event in Calgary and a virtual open house for solar training programs. So stay tuned for our newsletter for more information. Another exciting event to pop into your calendar is our annual online conference and trade show called the Solar Show. Please save January 29th to February 2nd, 2024 for our next Solar Show. And recordings of our last 3 sessions, Solar Show sessions, can be found on our YouTube channel. In addition to public education, we also host a number of live online courses at very affordable rates. They're about a quarter what other folks charge for solar industry professionals or those transitioning into the sector. Classes will be starting up again this fall on Tuesday and Thursday evenings for the most part. And once again, there's a 10% discount for members. Registration is now open, and the first course starts September 26th. We're offering $25 off for early bird registrations, anyone registering 2 weeks before the start date of a course. So if you're keen to get started on your learning before then, though, we also have pre-recorded courses and workshops for download on our website. Alrighty, last slide for me. If you're not already, I encourage you to join Solar Alberta as a member. We're constantly evolving our member service offerings, some of which include discounts on our courses and workshops, access to member-only content, and much more. Individual membership is just $35 and can be purchased at the link in the chat. Also, if you're looking for other ways to support our work, please consider volunteering or donating. The general volunteer link and the donate link are being popped in the chat as well. Now, without further ado, I want to take this opportunity to give a big shout out to EPCOR for sponsoring this year's seminar series as a whole. We couldn't offer all this amazing free content without the support of our sponsors. So we're always interested in developing more partnerships for our events. If you or your company want to work with us to educate the public about solar or solar-related technologies, please don't hesitate to reach out. Now I'm going to pass the mic over to Chris Chapelski, and he's going to welcome and introduce our speakers for the day. Welcome, Chris, and I'll let you introduce the others.
Great. Thank you, Heather, for that introduction. I'm the Senior Manager of Grid Transformation for EPCOR Distribution and Transmission Inc., the electricity distributor for Edmonton. EPCOR currently operates distribution and transmission infrastructure that provides safe, reliable electricity to more than 435,000 customers in the city of Edmonton. We distribute approximately 9% of the provincial energy consumption and work on behalf of the Alberta Utilities Commission to help facilitate the connection of solar arrays for the power grid in our service territory. As part of my quick introduction, I want to briefly talk about the energy community and EPCOR's commitment to supporting our customers. From 1992 to 2007, EPCOR saw only 1 solar array installed in the entire city of Edmonton, whereas we're now processing more than 100 solar installation applications per month, and that is growing. As of the end of July, we have more than 4,500 commissioned microgeneration sites in Edmonton, signaling the growing rate at which our communities are adopting this technology to benefit our environment. EPCOR will continue to work alongside our customers and solar installers as we collectively manage our energy resources and reduce our environmental footprint. From the solar array at our Hugh J. Bolton facility to Kisi-Galpisum Solar Farm at our E.L. Smith Water Treatment Facility, EPCOR continues to show our commitment to using renewables to reduce our GHG emissions and our impact on the environment. Kisi-Galpisum, a name gifted to us by the Enoch Cree, is helping to meet the City of Edmonton's goal to produce 10% of electricity locally and cleanly and close to where it is used. At EPCOR, we value the collaborative relationship with Indigenous groups and look forward to future ways we can work together for the betterment of our community and our environment. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing some details for today's speakers. First up, we have Dr. Neo Kamigabo Deondre Smiles from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. My apologies. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Victoria. His research work and their work there focuses on Indigenous responses to climate change based in cultural and natural resource management. They lead the Geographic Indigenous Futures Collaboratory, one of Western Canada's first Indigenous geographies focused labs. After Dr. Deondre, our second speaker of the day will be Andres Filella, who currently works as Director of Environment and Climate Change at the Metis Nation of Alberta. He is an engineering graduate, passionate about energy and sustainability from an early age. Before joining the MNA, Andres worked in environmental and sustainability projects in the oil and gas industry in Canada and Latin America. At the MNA, he has spearheaded the MNA Climate Change Action Plan, including the installation of 37 microgeneration solar projects at MNA-owned buildings across Alberta, and the Metis Crossing Solar Project, the MNA-owned, soon-to-be operational 4.86 megawatt AC solar farm at Metis Crossing. His professional interests are greenhouse gas quantification, sustainability, electricity, renewable energy, and anything numbers related. Traveling and experiencing new cultures and food keeps him busy during his downtime. So I'll now turn the microphone over to Dr. Deondre Smiles from Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe.
All right, thank you so much, Chris, for the very gracious welcome. I'm going to get my PowerPoint set up here. All right, there we go. So good afternoon, or I guess still good morning for a lot of us folks here on the West Coast. Good morning, Gimino Gizigeb. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Neo Kamigabo Indigenous Cause. My name is Neo Kamigabo Deondre Smiles. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Victoria. As mentioned before, I'm just starting my third year here. I'm also head of the Geographic Indigenous Futures Lab. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I'm pretty excited to listen to what Andres has to say about Métis responses to solar energy generation. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to give a very kind of quick overview of what Indigenous leadership in renewable energy sources looks like. In order to do a proper treatment of this, it probably would take a full semester-long course, if not longer than that, because there's a variety of things that Indigenous nations on both sides of the US-Canadian border are doing in order to help promote renewable energy sources. But I'm just going to give a few examples here and talk a little bit about why this is really important here in the present day and age. I'm pretty casual about these sorts of things, and so yes, please do use a Q&A function. If I see a question that's pretty relevant, I'll stop and answer it. And yeah, but otherwise, if you're like me and you don't usually think of the questions until the very end of the talk, feel free to save your questions for the end, and I'll also provide contact information so that you can contact me if you're especially like me and you don't think of your questions until like about an hour after the event is over, and you're like, dang, I should have asked that question there. I wish I would have thought about it. Well, make myself available for that. So with that, let's get started here. So probably one of the most mindless things that we do is human beings, especially today in modern day both Canada and the United States, as well as elsewhere in the world, as well, we use electricity, we use power. So for example, this morning, when I woke up at about 5:45 this morning to see my partner off to go to work, I flipped a little light switch on the lamp right next to my bed and turned on illumination for the room, right, to be able to get around. I'm using plenty of power right now. I have a fan right here blowing air on me. I have a ring lamp shining light on me. I'm using a laptop that requires power. Electricity powers the heat in my apartment, which I definitely am not using right now, as it is about 20 some degrees in Victoria, where I'm calling in from. It's one of these things that's an everyday part of life, but we don't often think about, well, where exactly does this come from? Well, if you ask your average Canadian, where does power come from? They'll say, oh, it comes from a power plant, right? Well, we get hydro from a dam or a power plant or some kind of generation facility. But if you ask them to elaborate beyond that, you might get some kind of commentary about, well, power lines, right? Well, you carry power along power lines, but then, and then kind of the beginning source, a generation source. But that's about as far as kind of analysis and kind of the kind of thinking about, well, where is it that we get power comes from, right? It's not something that people think a lot about. Maybe here on the West Coast, sometimes I think people are a little more conscious than back in the American Midwest where I grew up and where I'm originally from. But people don't understand kind of the deep, really complex relationships that come from power generation. So if I were to show you something like this, for example, this might be a little more confusing, right? You might be like, well, holy crap, that is a lot of different terms, a lot of different kind of areas here. Well, this is an energy flow map. This is an energy flow map of different forms of energy production and energy consumption in the United States of America. So for example, here on the left-hand side, you have a number of the different energy sources, such as petroleum, natural gas, coal, biomass, geothermal, nuclear. And you see kind of the different flows kind of point out, well, where exactly is this power going, right? So it's not just going towards electricity generation as you might find, it also goes towards the commercial sector. So as far as, both industry and service outputs, it goes towards full residential, like such as what I'm using right now. It goes towards transportation as well, right? It both fuel, like as in the physical gas that we put in our cars, as well as nowadays electric vehicle charging stations, different kind of industrial forms here, as well as kind of governmental uses of energy as well. I had a little bit of trouble trying to find an energy flow map of Canada. I teach about these sorts of things, and so if you know a really, really good source to find this for Canada, please do let me know, because I want to make sure that I'm showing this to my students in my courses as well. But as you can see, power comes from a lot of different places. It goes a lot of different places. And this is a very complex yet very, very fragile network, right? That if there are shortages in the supply chain, if there are production difficulties, it can lead to a lot of problems. This was before my time, and I probably have folks in the audience that might remember things such as the oil embargoes in the 1970s, as well as the energy policies of the Canadian government in the late 1970s and early 1980s to generate energy independence for the Canadian states. Something that we see nowadays more often with the assertion of Canadian sovereignty in the Arctic and in the north with energy sources up there. I could go on, but we understand that energy is a major part of our lives. Well, it's not just, it can be a little more tangible as well. As a geographer, I talked a lot about, relationships with land, relationships with space. Well, when we think about the ways that energy is transported, power lines is one of them. Pipelines might be another way, right? And so, actually, here we go. Got my slides flipped around. That's all right. So these are energy pipelines, right? These are the petroleum pipelines, things that we're familiar with, especially here in the West, right? Especially in places such as Alberta, which has built its economy upon the energy industry. Here's a good graph here about kind of the total generation of power, about what we look like here in Canada. So you might be thinking, well, according to this, Deondre, 60% of power generation in Canada in 2022 was from hydro, right? Was from water sources. Actually, very little of it comes from petroleum. Well, this is true, but these sorts of energy sources have had deep impacts on Indigenous communities from different sources, right? So I want to kind of go over these quick landscapes of extractive energy sources. So things like coal, these are sources of energy that are created from mining, right? Extractive and extremely destructive to Indigenous land, strip mining, even nuclear power plants, right? The uranium has to come from mines, particularly there's a history in the United States of contamination of Indigenous lands and deep, very serious health effects towards Indigenous communities created by working in these mines. The routing of pipelines, for example. So I just showed this map here where we see some of these pipelines get really close to major population centers. And this doesn't show all of them. So, for example, the Canadian energy company Enbridge, for example, back home, my nation has had a really, really contentious relationship with Enbridge. Why is that? Well, as we've seen with other pipelines, such as the Dakota Access Pipeline, such as the Keystone XL project, Indigenous nations have deep opposition to these energy initiatives due to their potential to cause deep harm to the environment. So, for example, with Enbridge's Line 3, which was which has historically been routed through my own nation. Back in the early 1990s, the pipeline sprung a leak and about 1.3 million gallons of oil spilled out onto a frozen tributary of the Mississippi River back in 1991. And so when Enbridge came to my tribe a number of years ago and said, well, we want to rebuild Line 3 and we want to keep it on the same routing, my tribe had a referendum and we said, no, we don't want this being built through our reservation anymore because of the deep impacts that it could have to the environment and to our water. Besides that, power generation such as coal and natural gas, these contributes to greenhouse gases and increased emissions, which has a connection to climate change and climate crisis, something that particularly here in BC, we are really feeling the brunt of right now, such as the wildfires that have raged across our province as well as across Alberta over the summer, as well as much closer to home here. As a matter of fact, a major road in and out of Victoria was just closed due to wildfires driven by increased droughts and increased temperatures. So I could go on and on about this as well, but this has led to kind of a desire among Indigenous communities to say, well, what might be the alternatives be to these extractive, like non-renewable energy sources, right? What sorts of things can we look towards in order to promote more equitable energy and climate futures for our communities? Well, there are several different types of renewable energy sources. There's solar power, of course. There's hydroelectric power, wind power, tidal power, geothermal, and then biomass as well. Today, I'm going to talk very briefly about Indigenous leadership kind of in three different areas. That is solar power, hydropower, and wind power. So for example, Indigenous leadership in hydropower. So historically, dams, hydropower, it gets a bit of a bad name in Indigenous communities because of the historic nature of how hydropower is developed. So historically in the United States and Canada, hydropower dams, hydropower generating stations, oftentimes were built at the expense of Indigenous lands that were flooded over or otherwise damaged and kept away from Indigenous communities in the name of building up reservoirs, building up on these dams that could help generate that kind of power. We think about examples such as the Pick Sloan project in the United States, as well as the James Bay project in Quebec. To say nothing of other dams, both historically and contemporaneously. Here in BC, for example, the Site C Dam up in northern BC is an example of kind of contentious relationship between advocates of hydropower and Indigenous communities. However, it would be false to say that Indigenous communities have not also looked at hydropower as a way to help provide self-sufficiency and to help reduce their reliance on diesel and oil-based energy sources. So for example, on the picture on the right-hand side here is a First Nation up the BC coast. There's actually a couple of nations there that have engaged in either building new hydropower stations or expanding the capacity of existing hydropower stations that they've been operating in order to reduce the reliance on diesel generators, which are more harmful for the environment, for example. In wind energy, another really great example here. So the Nakotchuk First Nation, for example, just built a new wind farm just a couple of years ago, which was done through with support of $50 million in funding from the Canadian government. The community intends on using this wind farm to generate energy to sell to local utility companies that are interested in renewable energy. Their first payment that they got was $430,000, and the chief of community says that the expectation is that when it's at full power, when it's going at full steam or full wind, no pun intended, they look to generate $800,000 to $1.2 million a year in revenue from the wind farm, which can create community self-sufficiency and provide a net boon of renewable energy to local power companies that are seeing increased demand from consumers to create power from renewable sources. So there are large-scale projects like this. There's even small-scale projects. So if I go back to the title slide, for example, this is a demonstration here of Coestus First Nation in Saskatchewan that was funded by the Canadian government to show, well, this is a demonstration of how we can generate and store wind energy even in a small community. So this is happening at a large scale, and it's also happening at a small scale as well. Last but not least here, I want to talk a little bit about my own nation, where as I've mentioned before, we've had kind of our own kind of negative experiences with energy sources, with energy production initiatives. And so we've decided to try to find different ways to provide power to our community in ways that are more in keeping with Anishinaabe values of living in good relation with the environment. And so 6 years, I guess 6 years ago now, I was about to say 7, but I'm getting a little bit too far ahead of myself. We constructed a community solar garden. The idea was that we have a large amount of people that have trouble meeting their energy bills every month and every year. And we decided that what if we created a solar garden that could provide free electricity or extremely discounted electricity to low-income families, as well as help provide power for the broader community. And so in 2017, we built the solar garden, and it provides power for around 100 low-income families on the reservation, which is located in north central Minnesota. I'd say about 200 kilometers south of the Minnesota-Ontario border. So the solar garden has been a wild success. That this has not only provided power to the communities, but has also led to the band selling power to local power companies, such as the other First Nations that I've mentioned here have done for local power companies in their area. And because of the success of this, the United States government and Department of Energy said, well, you've done a good job with this. Let's see what it would look like to expand your capacity. And so they provided $800,000 in 2021 to provide for solar panels to be built on tribal government buildings that will not only power those governmental buildings, but also, again, will provide power to be sold to local utility companies. The Leech Lake Band estimates that they probably could save up to $2.3 million in energy savings each year because solar energy is more efficient, especially in northern Minnesota, where energy efficiency in order to heat buildings and to cool them in the summertime is of vital importance. But also they say we could make hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit from selling this energy to local energy companies, building self-sufficiency for our nation as well. So this is something that we're actively thinking about. We're also active in trying to find uses for hydropower and biomass, as well as some kind of early exploration into wind energy developments as well. All right, so what are some of the continued and next steps? I want to focus on capacity building. And so one of the biggest things that I say is that you can see that Indigenous nations are successful in this renewable energy generation. And so they need to be able to have more access and more opportunities to demonstrate their leadership and to expand the access to all members of their communities. And so my recommendations for capacity building as well, one, federal funding, for example. One of the kind of criticisms that I've had of the Canadian government is that oftentimes when it comes to kind of, clean energy and kind of environmentally friendly initiatives in Indigenous communities, sometimes the money is not quite as forthcoming. On the other hand, when it came time to buy the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the Canadian government was able to find the billions of dollars. And so one of the arguments I say is that you see these demonstration projects, you see these nations that you've given money to already finding success. You need to open up the pocketbooks more and provide more federal funding. But there also needs to be support for local grassroots projects as well, that not everything needs to be a big multi-million-dollar project, but sometimes we can help build capacity at a more local and individual level as well, while still holding up that support for broader community-led efforts. I argue that, well, there needs to be Indigenous leadership in all projects that are being done, that when you're coming to a community, you can't come in and do a top-down, this is what we want you to do. More of kind of saying, what is it that the community needs and how can we help you to meet those needs? As well public education, such as what's going on here with these events, for example, teaching people that renewable energy is not a bad thing, that it can be economically successful and an economic boon, and it can be more sustainable going into the future. Something that I think sometimes in this part of the world that gets a little bit of pushback from industry and folks that have an interest in this, but the more that we educate the public and the more that we show the success stories, the more that people would be more willing to kind of explore these kind of different avenues. All right, there we go. That's a very quick kind of overview here, but again, we actually have somebody here who's demonstrating that leadership, who's going to kind of talk us through those examples. And so I want to say, Miigwech, thank you so much. Here's my contact information right here if you want to make contact outside of this event today. And I look forward to the next speaker and to your questions and conversing with you later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Deondre. I just need to, just a minute to set up my slides. One second. Is everyone able to, are we okay on the slides?
Looking good.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna get started. So thanks, Deondre, for that introduction. My name is Andres Filella. I am Director of Environment and Climate Change at the Metis Nation of Alberta. I've had the pleasure of working with the MNA for just over 6 years. And today I'm gonna talk about a project that is very near and dear to my heart, the Metis Crossing Solar Project. So first, I wanted to just get a bit of an overview as to who the Metis Nation of Alberta is. So the Metis Nation of Alberta is the government of Metis people within Alberta. Metis people are one of the 3 distinct Indigenous peoples of Canada. The Metis Nation homeland extends from parts of BC all the way through the prairies, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, into parts of Ontario, part of the Northwest Territories and the northern US. The MNA has been around for almost 100 years as an organization. We've been operating under a nonprofit model, and our real aim is the advancement and the socioeconomic well-being of Métis people in Alberta. Excitingly, we are transitioning to an Indigenous government body. And so you may have seen back in November of last year, October of last year, a lot of fanfare around the MNA Constitution, which was ratified last fall. So we are undergoing a transition from a nonprofit to an Indigenous government. We represent over 60,000 Metis Nation of Alberta citizens across Alberta. So now I'm going to go a little bit into a project. Before we go into why, I want to talk about what. So the Metis Crossing Solar Project is a large-scale solar project that the MNA has done. It's about 14,000 solar modules. It's located in Smoky Lake County, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. One of the questions that we get all the time is why? Why is the Metis Nation of Alberta doing such a large project? And it really comes down to our citizens. Our citizens told us, and they meet every year at an annual General Assembly. The MNA AGA, Annual General Assembly back in 2017, resolved and directed the MNA to design and undertake climate change initiatives and programs, including actions aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing Métis involvement and awareness of climate change, while creating capacity and economic opportunities for MNA citizens. Under this direction, the MNA Environment and Climate Change Department launched what we call our MNA Climate Change Action Plan, which is a series of projects and initiatives aimed at achieving those 5 strategic goals that you see on your right there on the screen in bubbles. We've done quite a few projects, and I have to thank Solar Alberta for providing some of the resources that we've actually taken and used. As Heather mentioned when we introduced, we've done about 37 microgen projects. You see 2 beautiful setups, one of at our provincial office here on Kingsway Avenue in Edmonton, as well as our Métis Housing affiliate building in Edmonton as well, where we've done energy efficiency projects, education and awareness, as well as we have a community-based climate monitoring initiative. Here are just a few pictures of some of the things that we do. I do encourage folks, if they want to learn more about what the MNA Environment and Climate Change Department is doing, please go to our website, albertametis.com. But, we always were thinking, we want to achieve these 5 goals. We know that microgen, for instance, produces some economic benefits. We know that it reduces GHG emissions. But can we do something that has a larger impact? That was really the question. So we wanted to get the same benefits, but we wanted more of them. And this is where this larger scale or large scale renewable energy concept came to mind. Like, I think it's a good idea to pursue it. I think it would really kind of fulfill some of those goals that we're aiming to achieve. And when it came down to location, I don't know if people here are really familiar with Metis Crossing. Metis Crossing is it's really a piece of land that the Metis Nation of Alberta owns, about an hour and a half away northeast of Edmonton. You see some pictures of our beautiful cultural gathering center on Lodge that we've opened there, but the land's a little bit bigger as well. So, when we were looking at where we would do a project like this, one of the things that we learned quickly is that we needed to have relationships with the people there. We needed to ensure that there were partnerships already there. And the MNA had a long-standing partnership with the town of Smoky Lake and Smoky Lake County for many years, even decades. So it became a natural fit when we were thinking about, hey, where do we locate this? Its main aim is to produce some of those community benefits. And so we had a lot of discussions with the town and county back then. We wanted to really understand, other than the obvious environmental and financial impacts that we would see, what are some of the benefits that we would see for our own communities? Of course, there's the Indigenous community-owned project that will produce proceeds for an Indigenous community, the Metis Nation of Alberta, which will lead to better programs and services to our citizens. The town of Smoky Lake was interested in community development. So, we were able to work out a community development fund. Maybe we could leave something behind for the local community. The county was really interested in the tax revenue of a project like this. There was desire that local and Métis communities would see training and hiring of their businesses. And we were able to introduce local and Métis hiring goals in our procurement process. Social benefits, we believe that this has been a great example on how to do Indigenous partnership right. We've aligned our project with local infrastructure and economic development plans. There's the alignment with Métis traditional values of self-sufficiency, self-sustainability, enable self-determination in a financial sense. These revenues will allow the MNA to take within their own hands what they want to do with it. It's not tied to other governments' terms and conditions. And it's respectful of Métis governance in such a way that it's really been born out of the community. It's not something that we've been forced upon through, for instance, like a last-minute partnership on paper. And of course, there's the environmental benefits. We're estimating that 4,700 tons of CO2 equivalent will be reduced in year one, and every year after that. We are committed to knowledge sharing as one of the reasons I'm here today. We want to make sure that we share our story, we share what worked for us, what didn't work for us, and hopefully see other projects such as ours come out. And not by coincidence, this project will also generate enough power to offset the electricity load of all MNA and MNA affiliate operations, which is the equivalent of about 1,200 Alberta homes. So, we thought we had a good concept, and I'm just going to jump into, once we made a decision that we wanted to explore it, what are some of the things that we looked at to make sure that we could actually do it? First and foremost, we need a little bit of money. So Deondre mentioned how critical it is to provide funding. And these projects such as these, they have specific benefits that are not really captured by, say, your regular project that perhaps a large multinational might do, right? So we were able to secure a Government of Alberta fund. At that time, it was the Alberta Indigenous Green Energy Development Program to do something that we call pre-feasibility. Pre-feasibility is really a desktop study when you're looking at, what is the technology, what does the resource look like? What does the land look like? Is there any major environmental risk or any major economic risk or community risk there? As well as what does the infrastructure look like in terms of distribution lines? So what does the electrical system look like within the area? I'm just going to go through some of the things because these are questions that we get all the time. Did we look at other resources? Yes, we did. In terms of resource, wind was a little bit questionable and solar was bang on. Really, at a desktop review, solar seemed to be the resource that made the most sense for us. We also look, and this is a Google Earth view. In purple, you have the outline of the Metis Crossing site. And in yellow, we looked at different parcels of land as well. We wanted to minimize environmental impact. We wanted to minimize impact to viewscapes as well. This is also near a historic site. And through all that, we decided on this little piece of land here in yellow, close to the top here in your screen. At the bottom, in red, you see the location of our culture gathering center right now. And once we completed our pre-feasibility in 2018, we needed more money. So these are long and arduous processes. We started our process back in 2017. We are just building our solar power plant today. So it's taken about 6 years. But back in 2018, we needed additional money to do actual studies on the site. So we needed to send our geotech folks to look at what the area looked like in terms of soil conditions. We needed to actually send biologists and look at what the environmental risks were looking like. Hired companies to make sure that they produce more detailed engineering, procurement, and construction estimates. And then at the bottom of this list here, I think two of the key pieces that are really important is permitting and regulatory. These are arduous processes. It took us about 2 years, and we were able to obtain the Alberta Utilities Commission approval. In September 2020, we really celebrated. The final note there, corporate structure, equity, and finance support, raising money to build it was absolutely critical and a challenge. We talked to a lot of banks. At the end of the day, it was our partnership with the town that shone through. The town of Smoky Lake came to us at that time. The Municipal Climate Change Action Center, which was one of the few funding streams that was providing funding for these type of projects. Through our partnership, we were able to work something out. They believed in our project. They said, essentially, we don't have a project right now that I think is at a stage where it could be funded. You do. I think we believe in your project and we're able to make it work. So it's a great story to tell. And more recently, actually, through that partnership, I think we've been recognized with additional funding through the Government of Canada, Sustainable Renewables and Electrification Pathways, which provided a little bit more funding, which we really kind of made us be able to move towards construction. And usually I have my energy sustainability manager go through these slides, Ron Henderson, so a little bit of shout out for him. So I'm going to go and try to go through these. This is a bit of a pictorial overview of what we have today. So we broke ground in fall of 2022. This is what the site looked like in the summer of 2021. On your right there, you see what it looked like in September of 2022. Line locates or surveying the land. We started real construction in December of 2022 in the cold. On your left there, you see some of the piles. So these are screw piles that go into the ground. We have our building as well, where our construction crews coordinate their work. And mid-December, you see the fence up, some of the racking as well go up. Fast forward to April 2023, more of the racking there, some of the construction crews doing more work. And on the right side, you see some boxes next to the racking. Those are our modules, our panels. Really interesting note, we are committed to minimizing environmental impacts. We have had a few little birds set up next as well. So we have been in constant communication with at least 2 professional biologists to make sure that we implemented processes to make sure that they were not disturbed. So little guys have been able to nest, breed, and then grow up, and then they flew away, and then they'll be able to resume construction in the area. We also run into a bit of hiccups. On your right there, you see what a pile looks like. It's essentially a metal beam with what looks like a screw at the bottom. You screw them into the ground. Some of them were running into issues in a particular area of land, of the property. So we've had to remediate quite a few of those. You know, these are things that, despite us doing geotechnical assessment, we still run into some issues, right? You know, so for other folks, you know, you can plan so much, but at the end of the day, you don't really know unless you dig, I guess, 1,400 holes in our case, what's going to be in there. But we have made quite a bit of progress. So you may have seen my background. I also have a few more other pictures here. This is what our site looked like in June 2023. So road construction and control building delivery in late June. A beautiful overview of the site. This is looking east. And you can see it's really divided into 3 sections. We call them block 1, 2, and 3. Block 3 is where we had a lot of the issues with the pile. So you see there's not a lot of activity right now. We're still working through remediation on that area. Some more equipment deliveries, AC combiner box, energized AC combiner boxes, a weather station as well on the right. Trenching and cables to make sure that these panels are connected. And the acceptance building. If you haven't been to Metis Crossing, we do have a beautiful herd of white bison, our neighbors to the southeast of our site. So they're silently expecting our finishing our construction and energizing of our solar power plant. We're expecting to be completed in the fall of 2023. We're excited. And really, this could have not been possible without the generous contributions of our partners. Our community partners, Metis Crossing, all the staff there on the board for hosting the project, for also supporting us on site. The communities of the town of Smoky Lake and Smoky Lake County for always being supportive in this and other projects that the M&A has gone. In the middle there, what I like to say, that's where the money is. The government of Alberta, the government of Canada, and the Municipal Climate Change Action Center for providing critical funding for us to be able to move through the studies onto construction. And on the right there, for our delivery partners. So we did partner with ATCO on the construction. IBI is our key technical advisor, and Carvel Electric is one of our key Metis subcontractors. So as I mentioned, we did look at Metis content on the decision of construction. And people are getting excited. One of the things that we launched as well as to get people involved was a naming contest back in May. We asked our Metis Nation of Alberta citizens to give us recommendations on what they would rename the Metis Crossing Solar Project. We had about 91 submissions. And just at our annual General Assembly last week, we revealed the name, Soleil Présent. It's Michif for a gift from the sun. We're really excited. I think it's a good learning piece for people and visitors to learn on what this means for the M&A. And thank you very much for the opportunity for presenting for you. You can reach us at climate@metis.org. You have a phone number there, and we're also pretty active in social media. My name is Deondre Smiles, Director of Environment and Climate Change. Thank you very much. Before we do go, we produce a little video on our project, and I think it's really nice. So I'm gonna jump off the PowerPoint and try to play it, and hopefully it's gonna work. We'll go from there. And again, thank you very much. I'm gonna play the video, and then I'll be right back.
This would have been the first people to build a home, the first people to raise animals, the first people to plant a garden on this land and stay here would have been the Métis settlers in the late 1800s. we are a culture that's alive and thriving. So behind me, we have the White Buffalo, where we share the stories of our past, the Buffalo Hunt and the Buffalo Council. And just to the north of us, we have our solar farm, which I think is a big move forward for the Métis people. So it's great for us to be able to share the past and the future all at one time.
I think for many, many years, our citizens, and even more so now, I see our youth, are very concerned that we all have to be concerned about climate change. And what do we do about it? So I think it's important that we do that.
The Metis Nation of Alberta, we just started looking at what to do around climate change back in 2017. We talked to over 300 of our citizens, and they resoundingly told us that as a Métis government of Métis people in Alberta, we need to do something about it and make a measurable impact on climate mitigation. And it's so exciting to have 100% Métis-owned solar project.
Well, I believe the Métis Nation should be very excited. This is a huge piece that the Métis Nation has been talking about for a long time. And it is the largest Métis Nation-owned solar project in Canada.
So Métis people have coexisted with the land for hundreds of years, and the shift in energy generation to a sustainable source is part of humanity coexisting with nature, and that's where I see Métis knowledge and Indigenous knowledge coming into renewables. Is that we're creating a sustainable energy source that can coexist with the new way that we're moving in our economy. Solar farm consists of 12,840 480-watt bifacial solar panels, 36 separate DC to AC inverters.
So obviously there's the climate mitigation effect of this, which means that we estimate that's going to be 4,700 tons of CO2 on the first year, and we'll get that over 25 years. So there's that piece, and we're very honored that the Métis Nation has employed a Métis contractor and its own people in putting them to work on such a great monumental project for our nation.
And it's almost like hanging out with my family here. It's a little bit different, like you can tell, but we're all almost still the same family. It's really cool, actually.
It's just been really refreshing to work with partners that are just so willing and able to support us. ATCO as our partners here, Filella Electric as one of our Métis subcontractors there. Everywhere we look, we just found people just really believing in what we're trying to achieve and helping us out.
So you're actually getting somebody's dream turn into a reality, and that reality goes to improving the community.
The milestone towards reducing our carbon footprint, transitioning to net zero, acting upon that climate change plan that has been in place.
Thank you, Andres. I appreciate you sharing that. I know some people are having some audio concerns and other things. Is it possible, folks are wondering if you might share the link to the video so that they could watch it at a later date? Is that a possibility?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I may have missed that. Okay, for sure.
That would be great. There was a little bit of a lag for some people and some audio issues for some people, but others were hearing it all right. But I think, yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing that link so folks can watch it. I assume it's publicly accessible, but if not, we could also send the link out just to those who have registered at a later date. So thank you for sharing that. It was awesome to see it in action. So thank you both for your wonderful presentations. You just about had me in tears here because I'm pretty excited about all this. So I'm just going to refrain from crying with you though today. So let's dive into these amazing questions that folks are asking. And I would ask that, again, if anyone has questions of our two presenters, please put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat, because we're going to be using the upvoted questions and the upvoted function just to make sure we get through as many as possible and as much as possible that's on everyone's minds. So the first question today, and I think maybe we'll start with you, Deondre, because it's a broad question, and I'm going to add to it a little. So the question is, do you see more Indigenous involvement in renewable energy in regulated markets like BC and Saskatchewan, or deregulated markets like Alberta or Ontario? Do you think the nature of the market has any impact on that, or is it similar? And I guess I would add to that question, in general, are there hot spots for Indigenous solar action in Canada and in the US? You know, who's watching who here, and who are the influencers, I guess, or the inspiration, as the case may be? Where are you seeing the most activity?
So that is a really, really good question. I would generally say that I from my exposure, and again, I'm an American in Canada that's still relatively new to the country, but I've seen that it's pretty, as far as the involvement, that it's pretty widespread throughout, so regardless of kind of the local amount of regulation that is involved in the local hydro industry. Here, I would say that in BC, you probably see a bit more involvement, maybe because of the regulation, but also just in general that First Nations out this way seem to be a bit more assertive about kind of conservation and kind of natural resource-based sort of projects. Just given the history of BC and such, but you know, there are a number of examples here while putting this talk together, you know, that I saw in Ontario, as well as, you know, in Manitoba and other sorts of places. And so, yeah, I would say that it's pretty spread. As far as kind of hotspots, I would say in the United States, I mean, obviously we see a lot of wind energy stuff being done on the Great Plains, just because of the wind resources that are available. As far as solar energy, you see a bit obviously in the American Southwest, for sure, but also up in our neck of the woods in Minnesota, you're starting to see more and more people sometimes forget that Minnesota is actually, it can be a very sunny place, actually, that even with our infamously cold temperatures, we still have about, I'd say maybe about 200 some days of sunlight, appreciable sunlight every single year. And so yeah, I would say that those are kind of the hotspots and places to look to. As far as here in Canada, I'm still kind of learning kind of the landscapes of what that looks like. I would be highly surprised if nations, especially down this way on Vancouver Island and in the Lower Mainland, which are on average some of the more sunnier places in Canada, haven't been looking at this as potential kind of sources of power generation. So I feel like that's a partial answer, but that's kind of the way that I've been seeing things.
Yeah, it's helpful to hear. And I know I used to think it was just BC that had a pause on larger renewable generation, and now I thought that was maybe related to a Crown Corporation piece, but now we've seen even in a deregulated private market, there's nothing really stopping the government from putting a pause on large renewables if they want. Do you know in BC and Alberta if the large renewable pause is being applied to Indigenous nations as well? It just seems a bit, again, highly colonial to implement a renewable pause on other nations, but curious about that.
That is a good question that I don't know the answer to, unfortunately.
Okay. I'll dig into that and see what I can find. I mean, I think there are a lot of unknowns right now with these various pauses that are in play. Andres, I guess I'm wondering for you, how did you find working with the AUC and the government of Alberta, just in terms of those connectivity pieces? Did the deregulated market help, or did you feel like it would be easier to work with a Crown Corp or something more regulated?
Well, I unfortunately don't have a lot of experience dealing with another market other than Alberta. I would say, you know, we from the M&A's perspective, we're not in the business of opening power plants. We certainly were, you know, I think we're really lucky and appreciate funding supports to make sure that we have the resources to make sure that we engage with competent professionals, that we can do our own due diligence, that we can go into good partnerships. So I think that's really critical, right? Like these are every nation, every Indigenous community at different stages. In terms of dealing with the regulator, it's an arduous process. I wouldn't say that it was good or bad. I think it's lengthy, and I think it's really thorough. So it took us at least 2 years to go through that process. There's a lot of detail that goes into an AUC Rule 7 submission. Yeah, so.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I know that's a big question, so I appreciate you both taking a stab at it. Bob's wondering, what is your perspective on the renewable moratorium announced on August 3rd in Alberta? Maybe I'll let you start with this, Andres, as the Albertan in the room, and then we can turn it over to you, Deondre.
For sure. So I will say, so the M&A, we are, it kind of caught us by surprise, to be honest. And so we are working on a submission. We know that that's due tomorrow. I want to talk about my project in particular. For our project, unfortunately, it doesn't affect us. That's really great. You know, if it had affected us, it would have meant additional cost and uncertainty to our project. So certainly something that would have been really worried about.
If this same pause was put into effect 4 years ago, would you have been delayed 7 months or more? Like, would it have affected you when you were going through that AUC process? Are you the right, are you the size? You know, you're over 1 megawatt. I'm assuming that it would have impacted you, but I'm curious.
Yes, of course. So like, yeah, if this moratorium were put in place when we were just in submitting, then it would have affected our project as it is drafted right now. So that would have been of concern, yes.
So this is the type of project that the current pause inhibits. So that's, I mean, it's helpful to know it doesn't impact yours, but just for folks to understand what type of projects would be impacted, I find that very helpful because a lot of people are trying to get a sense of what exactly is impacted here. And we're hearing different numbers and different projects. So thank you for sharing. Deondre, your perspective on, weigh in on Alberta politics, please do. It's kind of fun to hear the BC perspective on what the heck's going on in Alberta.
Oh boy, I'll have to be careful lest my remarks end up my remarks end up on the CBC or something like that. But yeah, you know, it's really kind of interesting to see the timing, as I understand it too. And somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, that the rationale that Premier Smith provided with it is a little bit suspect, where she says that energy companies approached her asking for the moratorium in letters, and then they actually went to the letters and said that there was no such request for that. But so you know, I think it's part of kind of maybe broader energy politics in Alberta, is my reading of it, is as a kind of a pseudo BCer, is I'm wondering where the, you know, if taking a look, saying like, where is the money, you know, follow the money, so to say, like who's making these requests of the Alberta government, of the UCP, you know, what, and then who benefits from this, right? And so it'd be interesting to see, you know, one thing that I found myself, when I Googled this really quickly, I was like, I should really check energy future prices, because I wonder if these are going to go up with that moratorium now, and demand is going to go up, for example. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of my read about it, is I'm wondering this is probably done for the benefit of non-renewable energy sources and those companies in Alberta, and they probably are this stands to gain a boon. And I would also be keeping an eye on any kind of legislative activity as well, because my guess is if this looks good for them, you might see more kind of permanent kind of restrictions kind of coming on that. It's coming from an American viewpoint, where Republican-led legislatures, this is right in their playbook, right? You hamstring any kind of, like, you know, green renewable source, you know, by short-term methods, while you can build up the legislative base to do more long-term kind of damage to it. So that's kind of where I take a look at it. Not that we in BC should really be wagging our finger at Alberta, as our NDP government seems to be kind of taking some little things out of the playbook there. And I wonder if we might see kind of, you know, kind of similar sort of weird things happening here in service of like extractive industry.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add some context, yes, the Premier did mention that she had received letters from the AUC and the ISO requesting the pause. And then she encouraged everyone to read the letters. And we did. And you're right, the regulators did not request a pause in their letters. So that was really confusing. Particularly confusing why she encouraged us all to read the letters that absolutely did not request a pause. So yeah, that wasn't necessarily the companies, but she was saying the regulators did that. And it's not clear that they did. So thank you for that. here we go. Another great question, one that we talk about a lot here at Solar Alberta. What is your opinion on the idea of a just transition and supporting Indigenous peoples and families who are currently working in the fossil fuel extractive industries? How does this transition look for these people in an equitable way? Deondre, do you want to kick us off here? And then Andres, you can follow up.
Yeah, I'd be definitely happy to. So this is kind of the $1,000,000 question, right? That happens that actually leads to a lot of debate within Indigenous communities. For example, in my own nation, we had folks that work for Enbridge. We have folks that are employed by Enbridge that go out and work on the pipeline, and that have had, and my nation has had a relationship with Enbridge for decades in that kind of a way, right? While also saying, hey, we don't want you to rebuild this pipeline through here. We want to seek more renewable energy sources. And so a lot of times, a lot of non-Indigenous folks will be like, oh, why don't you just completely transition right away, like at the snap of a finger, right? You should be able to do that, especially if you're so concerned about being ecologically sustainable. And it's like, well, there are still people that need jobs. Like people still need to put food on their tables. They still have to make a living for themselves, right? And you can't and detaching from that kind of an industry is not as clear cut as people kind of make it to be. And so I think that, for me personally, I feel that although it's not, if I had my way, if I could snap my fingers and we could completely disinvest tomorrow and embrace renewable energy sources completely, I'd 100% do it. But I think in the meantime, since that's not possible, it's providing kind of expanding capacity, right? As I talked about in my talk, like, finding ways to provide more jobs and provide that kind of transition, right? So that you can't just make these snap reforms, but instead providing a way, like an off ramp for people to be able to, be able to find work in these different areas, to find alternative sources of work and to slowly kind of detach and divest, right? And then that way, you're still able to, promote economic self-sufficiency, while still moving towards kind of a more just climate future. Again, I feel like that's a little more neoliberal sometimes than I think I would rather us be, but I think that a lot of times this is probably one of the more foolproof kind of ways forward, I think. But always happy to.
Well, I would say it's neoliberal, but it's also just realistic with what the situation we find ourselves in. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I know we have some of our partners who have joined us today, Iron and Earth and Relay Education. We've been working with them to make sure that we help folks transition out of the oil and gas sector, especially Indigenous folks who want to make sure that they have a path to a bright future. And hopefully a stable future that's less of a roller coaster for many. Andres, I guess to add to that question, I know you had some goals for Métis employment with your project. I'm just curious if you managed to hit your goals and achieve those goals. I know you succeeded to a certain degree, but I am curious how that went. And just from some on-the-ground experience, maybe you could add that perspective as well as any other comments on this question you have.
For sure. So maybe I'll just go to the just transition question a little bit. I think for me and personally, it's about making sure that there are resources available for folks that want to take on that transition, so that they understand what skills they need, so that they're ready to do that transition. I think a lot of the times people may wanna do that because of perhaps environmental reasons or purely economic reasons. They see the market moving that way, and it's really making sure that we provide support so that they can do that in a smooth way. In terms of Métis hiring goals or Métis inclusion in our project, one of the things that we do in a lot of our initiatives, and in particular for this one, we did quite a few things, but one of the things was as part of our RFP process, we engaged, we have something called Métis Works. So we provided notice of some opportunities to contractors that were listed under Métis Works. For people that are not aware, if you go to metisworks.com, I believe, or you can just Google Métis Works, it's a listing of Métis-owned contractors that the MNA and Apitogosan, who is our business affiliate, holds. So if you are a company that wants to hire Métis businesses, please go there. And we really just check for that if the ownership is 50% plus one Métis. And then we provided additional points for proponents that included not only Métis inclusion, but also local inclusion through our partnership with the town and county. That was significant. And the MNA actually didn't want to distinguish between the two. They said, as long as it accomplished one or both, ideally, additional points. So that was really cool. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate the context there. Becky's wondering, is Métis Crossing accessible to the general public to go there and learn more about renewable and Métis history? I'm actually going there next week, so I can tell you it is. But I was told the solar farm's not ready for tours yet. Do you know when we can start going to the Métis Crossing for solar farm tours?
I don't. It's very much a construction site right now, so I would not encourage anyone to go there. It would be unsafe. But it absolutely is part of the plan. The plan and why we located it is the story, the past, the present, and the future. This would be part of that future piece.
Great.
So hopefully next year.
Yeah, and I see that they're already offering a number of different tours of the area, and so that's great. Hoping to organize a Solar Alberta tour to your site someday. So this is on our dream list, maybe for next year. All right. We have a question here about how much Indigenous lands and forests mined up to access. Oh, I think that might be lined up. How many Indigenous lands and forests? Okay, sorry, I'm struggling on this one. Let me see here. Mined up to access the resources required and how much carbon emissions lost. Oh, I see. So, okay, how many of the lands and forests were mined? Oh, I see. So did you have to like deforest the area where your panels are? I think that's the question. So question around deforestation due to solar. Was that it looked like you built on previously developed lands, Andres, but I could be wrong. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so we as I mentioned on my slides, we had quite a few areas of land. Our aim was always to make sure that we minimize environmental impact. So in this case, and there were some other restrictions, right? You have to look at wetland setbacks, which we did look at. This is near a natural historic site, so there were viewscape requirements that we looked at as well. At the end of the day, we located this piece of land where it was unused, like it was previously used farmland that wasn't used right now and had no plans to be used in the near future. And so that's it. You know, through our board, we made a decision that this was the right location, as well as in following. There's guidance documents from AEP on how to make sure that you minimize impact, and of course, in partnership with through the regulator as well, to make sure that this development would not impact the environment, essentially, would minimize impact to the environment. There's always an impact, but this has been minimized as much as it can.
On that note, I know you and I had a very interesting conversation a while ago about fencing, and I would really love it if you could explain your fencing choice because it's beautiful and everybody's really excited that I guess you've heard of raise the roof, but have you heard of raise the fence? Are you still going ahead to raise the fence for the little critters? What is your decision on that at the end of the day?
Oh, okay. So I'm not sure. So there are the Alberta elect. I would probably have to check with my technical advisor, but I understand there are some electrical code requirements on the type of fence, and there's also some requirements for wildlife. So you do need to leave a little bit of space for the wildlife to be able to still go through the site. So we were able to accommodate those. I think at some point there was a bit of a concern around the type of fence and it's how it looks like. The electrical code requires like a wire fence, and wire fences tend to look kind of ugly. To be honest, what we're finding right now is that once the panels are up, you don't even look at the fence. You just go straight to the panels.
Yeah.
And so people don't even notice the fence.
Yeah, I just remember hearing you tell me that you were lifting the fence up a bit for the little critters, and I thought that's so great. You know, if you can't get rid of the fence completely, at least allow for some travel through. And a related question, bigger critters, but Lisa's wondering, are bison compatible with solar farms? Again, you have educated me on this topic, so please share that with the rest of the attendees. How is your bison analysis? I know we hear a lot about sheep and solar, but how does it work with bison?
That was really interesting. So one of the ways that solar power plants minimize manage vegetation is through the integration of sheep and sheep herds. So they come in and eat the grass. There is incompatibility between sheep and bison. We have learned there is like some sort of pathogen that sheep produce when and so essentially sheep poop does not go along with bison. And so we're looking at the fact that we have hired someone to give us a vegetation management plan. We do not allow bison to go into the power plant. I think hopefully I haven't seen bison power plant, but hopefully they don't climb it, or they're fenced separately, but they're nearby. But yeah, they're not going in there right now. We don't have any wildlife introduced into the power plant. It is at the construction site, and we're not planning on doing that for now. Yeah.
I've heard from some of our members that if it's bison or cow, you have to raise the solar considerably. And then when you have a very large ground mount, it adds a lot of extra cost. So I suppose if you really raise those panels up, you could tuck some bison underneath. But I think that might be cost prohibitive is what I've learned, as compared to sheep, where you apparently don't have to raise the panels up. So anyways, all sorts of interesting conversations about which livestock are solar compatible. We're going to start branding them that way. All right, Bob's got another question here. This may have already been asked, but how responsive are banks, insurers, or institutional investors to funding these types of projects? Is there a need for a new form of financial institution or a co-op to gather funds for projects that meet Ottawa's commitment for a net zero electricity grid by 2035? Deondre, do you want to kick us off with that? It's a sort of a general question there, and then maybe Andres can speak a little bit more specifically about their experience.
Yeah, that is a really, really, really good question. I know in my own nation's kind of experience, we had to seek federal funding to do so in the United States. I would suspect now banks are probably a little more open to it now than they might have been even 5 or 10 years ago. Kind of, you can call it greenwashing maybe in kind of a way, but also maybe kind of a view of like, oh, there actually is a return on investment on these sorts of things, which is oftentimes the driving motivation, right? Where a bank will fund such a thing as they're always thinking about, well, are we going to make money on this at the end of the day, right? Are we going to get a return with interest on our investment? And so I think banks are going to be more mindful about that now, as far as whether banks in Canada are going to, be willing to expend more funds, especially to meet like kind of a carbon neutral goal by 2035. I would probably feel most comfortable turning that over to Andres and kind of hearing maybe kind of if the Metis Nation has kind of had these dealings with these sorts of banks. I can see banks such as RBC and Scotiabank and other sorts of large financial companies maybe talking the talk as far as doing this, but as far as walking the walk, I tend to be skeptical as always, right? But I'll turn it over to Andres and see kind of hear what his thoughts are on this.
I unfortunately have to agree with you, Deondre. I think we've had so when we were challenged with having an approved project where we needed to raise capital to build it, we had a lot of discussions with banks, and I think, and I think they were great. I think there are people with great intentions there, but it really came down to the numbers for us, and we just can make it really work. I think they were asking for securities that we would never recommend that the M&A have, like guarantees. It's a risky proposition, right? But to put a lot of money into a project. I think maybe some recommendations that I would say is, I think one of the concerns that financial institutions have in Alberta is financing merchant projects. And our project is a merchant project. If you're not familiar with what a merchant project is, we don't have a PPA. We don't have a large company buying our power. We just sell it into the grid at whatever the market rate is. And so we find financial institutions really wary of that mechanism. Maybe they don't really understand that the revenue is going to be there. They see it as really risky. They really don't want us to lend us money. And then one of the other challenges that we face, and this is a funding piece, we had secure, as I mentioned, we were really lucky to secure critical funding through the MCCAC. They have provided from the government of Alberta. that funding came with strings attached. It required us to retire environmental attributes. In essence, it means that our power that we sell out of this, we can't sell offsets. So when we were looking at banks as well, essentially we didn't have green power, we just had power, right? So that interest that they had in trying to say, oh, it's green power, it wasn't there. And so the funding became a bit of a challenge in the end. I think we still needed that funding for sure, but maybe one of the things that that we would love to see is funders not really kind of providing funding in one hand and then taking the environmental attributes with the other. Really, if you're really incenting this type of project, just fund it. Don't take the environmental attributes away.
That's really helpful to know, because yeah, I was kind of curious why you didn't go with a PPA and whatnot. So I appreciate you explaining that, because I know that's the mechanism that so many solar farms are using in Alberta today to get financing. And basically it gives that assurance that the banks are looking for, but there sounds like there might be a downside as well, especially if you as a nation are intending to be, offsetting your own emissions, right, too. So then you can't just go selling off your green attributes, or you would be back at square one. You'd be creating power, but it's no longer green power for you.
Maybe I'll touch on that, Heather, because I think that's really interesting as well. One of the things that we found from our experience as well is going through a PPA, while it gives certainty to your financial institutions, we have actually seen pool prices being so high in Alberta lately that I think we're, thankfully through our project that has been funded, we are able to play the merchant game. We can see what the price is, because you would capture like solar, at least for now, as we move, that might be different in the future. For now, it tends to produce when prices are high. In our project, that means that we will sell that electricity prices are high. It means additional revenue to us. If we had a PPA, it would have meant additional savings for whoever had the PPA, and not to us. We get the same revenue. So I would argue that, sometimes that PPA, whoever gets most of the benefit perhaps is your counterparty and not you. I think I personally would love to see perhaps a little bit more of an understanding from financial institutions on what the market on the merchant mechanism is in Alberta, and see more willingness to lend money for those.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's very good to hear that perspective. I only know one other merchant developer that we had on a seminar was working in leasing land from Innisfail. And yeah, I think it was quite challenging as well to get all these things in place. I don't remember exactly what he mentioned, but it sounded like it was a bit more challenging than going the PPA route for sure. So, but hopefully it'll be well worth your time and the challenge. It sounds like it already is. Garnet has a question sort of related to what we were chatting about a while ago, but for Andres, how has the Métis capacity building and training been included in the solar project? I mean, I know you had, you even kindly shared with me the community benefit agreement. And do you feel like training, how did that look? Was there training involved?
It's a great question. So maybe I'll speak a little bit about what ended up happening with our relationship with ATCO. So Carvel Electric, they're a mainly electrical contractor. They had done some micro gen or smaller scale installations. So there was a period where, ATCO was really kind of committed in making sure that they received the proper training to make sure that they were able to install such a large project. So I think that's how we included it there. When we started, we looked at other mechanisms as well, but that's what we landed on at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. And the question, which I kind of feel like you've already given us an answer to, but Fitzgerald's wondering, is the solar project commercially viable over the medium to long term? It sounds very viable to me, but maybe you could just say yay or nay on that one.
Yes, because we're building it. We wouldn't be building it if it wasn't commercially viable. So and I will say, I think a large part of that has been the funding that we have received. if we
Mhm.
didn't produce it. Again, I don't think the Métis Nation of Alberta is in the business of opening power plants, so we don't like to take on risky propositions. So I think that this is where governments need to recognize the additional benefits of Indigenous owned renewable energy projects and need to fund them.
Mhm,
I think that it's unique.
mhm. And I know there are some nations like up in Fort Chipewyan that they invested in their own solar, and then they're now investing in solar in the south of our province. And so where perhaps the projects are even more commercially viable. So that I know you have taken 6 years of your life on this project, Andres, but I sort of hope the Métis Nation will also consider doing some of those investments elsewhere personally. It would be nice to see you continue on the power plant process just because of your great leadership. Deondre, I'm curious if you have anything to add on commercial viability of these solar farms.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very commercially viable. I mean, you give the example of my own nation that's looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. Kind of similar to Andres, they wouldn't be building this if it wasn't commercially viable and if they didn't have an eye towards kind of community self-sufficiency. I mean, obviously there's a bit of a cultural component to it as well, but I mean, at the end of the day, if they can generate some kind of savings off of this that can then be reinvested into the community, they're going to do so. So yeah, I would say that our solar farms are very commercially viable as well.
Yeah, there's a reason why there's a rush on all the good solar land in Alberta right now. It's really a gold rush right now. So it's nice to see that it's not only benefiting the folks who are already benefiting from all the systems out there at play. We have time for one last question. So this one is around the life cycle analysis of solar. I have a brief answer I can give to this, but you two can add if you like. A question around when you produce solar panels and manufacture them, of course, basically how much fossil fuel do you need in that production piece and whatnot, and of how is that offset by the solar. So my understanding, and I was just listening to a presentation on this the other day, is that when it comes to solar, you will have actually reduced, you'll basically be net positive by year 2 or 3, I believe. So basically, yes, there's energy used to manufacture the solar, but then by year 2 or 3 of your operations, you are actually on the other side of that. So you're actually a net contributor to emissions reductions as opposed to production through manufacturing. So I'm not sure if either of you have anything to add on that. It's not really related to the topic at hand today, but feel free to comment on that life cycle and manufacturing piece, and then we'll wrap things up here.
I think you answer that.
It's okay.
With the data, yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you. I know we're having a lot of good food for thought here in Alberta today about solar siting and where solar should go. And it's so neat to have an example of a nation that's thought so long and hard about where to place their solar array in this context. And also, of course, to get that wonderful overview from you, Deondre. So I just want to say thank you both so much for taking the time out of your day today to be with us. We're definitely going to have you both again on another seminar because this was just delightful and so informative. And also thanks to EPCOR for helping us make this happen. Of course, we couldn't be here without our sponsors. So really glad to be able to provide this free content. Again, this is all being recorded, so it'll be on our YouTube channel soon. And thank you to all our attendees. I think I saw at one point well over 60 folks here today. So great to have such a nice turnout on a beautiful sunny day. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of the day and look forward to seeing you again soon.